Misty Parenzan, and I'm honored to have this opportunity to share with you guys today just a nugget of what God's done in my life. This week is very significant for me. 6 years ago, this week was my last week as a drug addict. I struggled with an addiction to methamphetamines and cocaine on and off for 10 years, stopping for each pregnancy and starting back up before my youngest would turn 2. I know that may come as a surprise to some of you and be hard to believe, but I was an addict. In 2003, I was 8 months pregnant, and my husband and I, along with our 4 and our 7-year-old, we moved here from Arizona to start fresh and to get away from my past. About a year later, we opened up a business here in Destin called Under the Sea, where I was responsible for all the business operations in running that business. With all the new stress of that and my youngest turning 1, it was just normal for me to find my drug again, even though I was 2,000 miles away from where I'd always done it. This was a natural thing for me. It was my easy way to stay thin and uphold the image that I thought that I needed to get through life. I wasn't proud of it, but I justified it because I functioned completely normal in life and in business as far as I was concerned, so much so that anybody that knew me had no idea or even suspected that I was an addict. My husband, Matt, he was a different story. He would walk in the house a number of times and find that little baggie hidden in the house like a needle in the haystack, and I had pretty good hiding places. It never occurred to me then that God was giving visions to my husband, who did not know God, of where I hid my drug so that my sin would find me out. When he would find it, I would act like I'd never seen it before. I would deny that it was mine. I had no idea what it was, whose it was, or how it got there. And that was pretty crazy considering there weren't many other people in the house who it could belong to. If he ever thought that I was doing it because of my enlarged pupils or my mannerisms, or just his intuition, I would make him feel so bad for even thinking that I would do such a thing that he'd wish he never suggested it. I would turn it completely around on him, as bad as that would sound. Sorry. About a year later, we were fortunate enough to sell our business in January of '06. At this time, our kids were 9, 6, and about 2.5. And after many promises to them that we would start going to church, we finally started going that first Sunday in February of '06. That first worship service was so overwhelming for me that I had to run out and go to the bathroom because I was crying so hard, and I needed to get a hold of myself. Needless to say, over the next couple months, a lot of Sundays I would pretend to be sick and pick a fight so that my family would go to church and I could stay home and do my drug. If I did go to church, I made sure that we were late so that we would miss most or all of worship. But on April 18th, I went to the beach with a fairly new friend. It was supposed to be a group of ladies, but her and I were the only ones that showed up. And as we were sitting there that day, we were just talking about life and trying to get to know one another and talking about our past. And somehow she asked me the question, well, when was the last time you did drugs? And in my mind, I'm thinking it's been years, or I can't remember the last time. But no matter how hard I tried, that wouldn't come out of my mouth. There must have been something deep down inside that finally wanted to tell somebody and be free. Because what I said was, I did the last of what I had this morning. And she looked at me a bit stunned, and she went on to ask me, well, what did you do? And again, I'm thinking, here's my chance to backpedal and cover it up. I could say I just did prescription drugs, or maybe some diet pills, something other than what I was going to tell her. But again, that wouldn't come out of my mouth. And all that came out was, I said I've been doing crystal meth for the last 18 months. And I've tried to quit, and it's really not that big a deal, because I only do what I need each day. I don't spend too much money. I'm in complete control this time. And it's okay. I do all that I need to do as a mom and a wife, so it's okay. And she's looking at me like I'm crazy because I'm sitting there justifying my addiction. I'm trying to convince her that this is all okay and let's just move on and forget what I've told her today. And I realized very quickly that's not going to happen. So she goes on to ask me if I know Jesus. I said, my husband and I, we believe that God created us. I know there's a God up there, but I have a lot of religion in my background, and it never did anything for me before. I've tried it. It didn't work for me then. I don't really see what it's going to do for me now. And so, that's my look. That's my outlook on Jesus. She said, Jesus can free you. I said, yeah, I don't really know if I believe that, but I think I was really just wanting to get off the beach at that time. So she asked if she could pray. I said, sure, you can pray. And so we said a prayer. She said a prayer, and it was time for me to go get my kids from school. So I left that day. And that night I was just so scared she was going to call my husband and tell him everything I just told her, or call somebody and tell them. But she didn't. She actually just called and asked if I would come over to her house the next day. And I don't know if that was because she wanted to make sure I wasn't going to do any drugs, or if she really wanted to spend some time with me. So that next day, I got my kids off to school, and I dropped my two-year-old off at another friend's house. And I went to her house, and when I got there, she said, the first thing we're going to do is call the pastor's wife. I thought, I'm not going to call the pastor's wife. I've been greeting her and shaking her hand. She knows my family. I can't tell her who I really am. She said, well, it's either you or me. So, being who I am, I wasn't going to let her call. So I went ahead and called, and she answered, and I told her who I was and why I was calling. And with more love than I can express, she simply asked me if I owned a Bible. And I was sitting there thinking, did you hear what I said? Did you hear what I just said? And I didn't say that. I just said, no, I don't own a Bible. And so she said, okay, you need to go buy yourself a good Bible. There's lots of versions out there. Get one that speaks to you. She said, and you need to get a good devotion book. And you need to get some Christian music and just submerge yourself in everything God and remove all secular from your life at this time. And then she prayed for me when we got off the phone. The rest of the day, we just kind of prayed, and my friend read Bible verses, which didn't really mean a whole lot at that time. And she read some devotions, and we just kind of talked, trying to get through the day as she was telling me I needed to tell my husband. And I wasn't ready to tell him because it had been a while since he had caught me. And so even though he knew my problem, in my mind I was in denial. And I was afraid if I told him, he might actually leave me or decide he didn't want to do this life with me anymore. So I didn't want to tell him. So we decided that I would come back over the next day and we would put on my armor, as she put it. And so the next day, I got my kids off to school, and I was on my way to her house. And you see, this is coming up on day 3. And after about 3 or 4 days without the drug, the house could be falling down around me, and I wouldn't know it. I would be overcome with depression and all kinds of emotion. I wouldn't be able to function, not to mention I'd want to eat everything in sight. So I was getting scared, and I thought, as I'm on my way to her house, maybe I could just call and get a little bit, just to wean myself off. It's always been my way or the highway. So I just thought if I do it my way, maybe it'll work. So as I'm trying to call, the first time I call, I get a busy signal. The second time I call, it says system busy. And the third time, it's just a loud static sound. So I pulled into her driveway, and I was just overcome with guilt and shame of what I had just done, of all this time she had spent with me. I was emotional, probably because I hadn't had drugs in a couple days. I don't know, I was just really crying. She comes running out and asks me what's wrong. And I asked her, can God interfere with the phone lines? And she looked at my phone and she laughed and she said, oh yes, he can. And at that moment, there was a realization in my spirit that maybe this might actually work. Maybe what she's been saying is real. Maybe this God is so powerful that he could actually free me from this addiction. So we went in the house and we sat down with a list of names, and we decided to make myself feel better. There was just going to be people that were going to take my kids to school and pick my kids up from school and make dinners and sit with me for just a couple weeks, so that if I had a weak point or if I felt the need to get into control, I wouldn't be alone. And so we sat down and we made that schedule. And then we decided that night would be the night I would tell Matt. And so it was Thursday, April 20th. And that night she watched my kids, and we went to the beach, and where we've had lots of talks at that time, but never really meant anything. We went back to the beach, and I said, I have something really important I need to tell you. And I'm really afraid to tell you, because I'm not sure what your reaction's going to be. I think that we're going to need counseling on many different levels once I do tell you. And you're going to be really upset, and I really don't know what the response is going to be. So being a man, he's, of course, thinking that I'm going to tell him there's somebody else. So when I told him what I did, he was a bit relieved, which worked well for me. But I went on to tell him that I'd been doing meth for the last 18 months. And every time he ever found it or thought that I was doing it, it was mine and I was doing it. And that I was so sorry for all the lies and the betrayal and the money that I spent and how rough I made our life. And I just apologized. And he looked at me with relief and he said, I believe you. This time is different. And he said, I do think we need a counselor, and maybe we should let Jesus be that counselor. Maybe we should try this Jesus thing out. And so I'm also now stunned at this point, because it's not the response I was looking for. But at that point, we got on our knees and we said the best salvation prayer that we knew how to say at that time. And then we went home, and we had the most amazing intimacy that we had had in as long as either one of us could remember. It was a true picture of redemption. I told him about the last few days and about the plan for the people to step in. And that next morning was Friday. And I woke up and I called my friend and I said, I'm awake today. I can take my kids to school. I can do life. I'm okay. And Saturday I woke up and I went to breakfast with my family for the very first time in a long time, because you see, that was the time I would stay home and do my drug while my family left for the morning. And Sunday I got up and I went to church. And that went on day after day. 2 weeks went by, and I was finally sitting in my house, all alone. Nobody was with me. Nobody was checking on me. Nobody was calling. I was finally alone. And I realized for the first time in my life, I didn't want it. I wasn't pregnant. I didn't have an infant, but I didn't want it. And I could have called and got some, but I realized God had delivered me. He had removed the desire from my heart for this drug. He removed any need that my body had needed for this drug, and I had realized that. That was a true picture of Jesus for me during that time, full of forgiveness and grace and mercy. And I was the miracle that he needed to believe to know that God was real. God picked our family up into this cloud and moved us to places that we'd never imagined. We dove into church. He's blessed us with 2 more babies since then. I think the best part is that we didn't deserve it. You know, we weren't asking for it. We weren't praying for it. We weren't reading our Bible every day. We didn't own a Bible. I mean, we didn't go to church, or we didn't do anything we were supposed to, and God chose us to do this miraculous work in our life. And I'm so thankful that he did that. These past couple weeks, as I've been preparing for this, I heard a teaching on the Passover. Now, the Passover to me has always been a Jewish holiday. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing special. And as the lady is talking about the Passover, she says, you know, it was the time that God delivered Israel from their bondages. And it's symbolic of God delivering its people from their bondages, with the very last day of Passover being the day of new beginning. So as I'm sitting there listening to this teaching, I start to wonder what the Passover dates were for April 2006. And it was that very week, with the day of new beginning being Thursday, April 20th, the day that we gave our life to God. He is so significant. He's so significant in this very week that I'm up here. He's significant in the week that he delivered me. He's significant that my mom, who I've been trying to get here for 8 years, is suddenly here for this very week. Thank you for allowing me to share with you today. I have a song that ministered to me during those first couple years that I'm going to sing for you, and I just bless y'all. Thank you. pathway is broken and the signs are unclear, and I don't know the reason why you brought me here. But just because you love me the way that you do, I'm gonna walk through the valley if you want me to.
Listen to me music.
Yeah. I don't think I can start in the middle of the song.
We'll start you over.
Pathway is broken and the signs are unclear, and I don't know the reason why you brought me here. But just because you love me the way that you do, I'm gonna walk through the valley if you want me to. No, I'm not who I was when I took my first step, and I'm clinging to the promise you're not through with me yet. So if all of these trials bring me closer to you, then I will go through the fire if you want me to. May not be the way I would have chosen when you lead me through a world that's not my home. But you never said it would be easy. You only said I'd never go alone. So when the whole world turns against me and I'm all by myself, and I can't hear you answer my cries for help, I'll remember the suffering your love put me through, and I will go through the darkness if you want me to. So when I cross over Jordan, I'm gonna sing, I'm gonna shout, gonna look into your eyes and see you never let me down. So take me on the pathway, leads me home to you, and I will go through the fire if you want me to, and I will go through the dark